Okay guys, this is my first time using this screen technology and my first time using this specific headset with it. So bear with me while we go through this, but we see how we get on and see if it's worthwhile. So the first thing I want people in our SRC class to do is, if you go on to Moodle, you're looking for Unit 17, Computer-Aided Drafting in Engineering. If you come down to that third folder, Solidworks Introduction Parts, click in there. There's a PDF file with introduction parts, so if you open it, you should be brought to this image here. Now, some of us have been looking at this since last week. Some of us might only be seeing this for the first time, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to very simply walk through how you would make this in SolidWorks. Again, there could be better ways of doing it, but for the moment, this is week 1 of our SolidWorks introduction. It's probably a little bit difficult of a part to start on, but that's no harm. It'll teach us a few tips and tricks of SolidWorks, and we'll just get a little bit more familiar with how the software works. So when we go back to basic shapes, we should hopefully start picking things up a little bit quicker, because we've already been tried and tested with a little bit more difficult of a part. So here's our part. We can see each cube there represents 10 millimeters. There's a couple of different shapes to it, and we'll get it done in SolidWorks. So if we open up SolidWorks itself, the program, I finished the part there just to remind myself how to do it before I screen recorded. If we go into New and Part and OK, we should all hopefully have a pure blank screen. So when we're looking at a SolidWorks part, we want to think about what we want to build first and where we want to build it. So if we look at this little shape, it looks a little bit tricky at the very start, but we can see it's essentially a square with a square cut out of it. And there's sort of a little triangle shape going on here with a rectangle in behind it. And we've got a semicircle and again a bit of a rectangle, and there's a circle cut through it. And there's a little wedge here, which we might do at the end too. With SolidWorks, you always want to sort of break down a shape into its easiest part first, or its base part first, to start off with. And I'm hoping that when we look at this, we'll all agree that square looks pretty easy to do. We'll avoid this hole for the moment, but if we just got that base, we'd be in a good enough position to press on with the rest of it. So if we want to draw this initial square, what information do we have? Well, we know each one of these squares is worth 10 millimeters. There's 6 squares, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's a 60 by 60 millimeter square we're looking to draw. We're going to avoid the depth of it for the moment. All we want to do is draw a 60 by 60 square. So we go into SolidWorks, and then we should see front plane, top plane, and right plane. And this might be new to us, so we go back. And what they mean is the front plane would be if we were looking at SolidWorks from over here, looking this direction. Again, we would see a sort of straight horizontal rectangle here. We'd see a vertical rectangle. We wouldn't be able to see the angle on that because we'd be looking at it with 90 degrees. Over here, this would be our right plane. So if we look in here, we get a little bit more detail, so we can see the angle of this. We can see that there's a semicircle now. Again, we wouldn't know the depth or anything of that semicircle because we'd be looking at 90 degrees. And we can look in at the top. The top will show us that it's a 60 by 60 square in this instance. So that's where we want to draw our shape in the top plane. We will cover planes in a bit more detail and how they're more useful. For the moment, we just want to focus on the key SolidWorks features and actually getting sketching and drawing on SolidWorks. So we'll come back to planes in more detail. And for the moment, if you just follow the video step by step, that should hopefully be enough, and things will just start to make a little bit more sense as we progress into the weeks. If you just remember, front, you're looking at the front. Right, you're looking in from the side. And top, you're looking straight down on the object. So with that, if you come back into SolidWorks and you select your top plane, when you right click, you have this little blue square with a black arrow coming up out of it called normal to. If you select it, it brings you looking in at 90 degrees. So now we're looking perfectly over the top plane. And if we select sketch up here in our ribbon, pick this rectangle, we see an origin point emerge. With SolidWorks, it's always easy to snap points together with our initial drawing. So if we start at the origin with that orange dot popping up, we left click our mouse and we drag, we should get a square. With drawing the square, it doesn't really matter what size we draw it to. All we want is the initial shape that it is a square. So we can do this. We left click to release it. We should have a square now, and we're going to use the most powerful tool in SolidWorks, Smart Dimension. So Smart Dimension will let us define the actual measurement of this square. So we want a 60 mil by 60 mil square. So we can type in 60 and 60. Okay, so now you can see we've got down here, we've got a fully defined 60 by 60 square. And it's fully defined because of these little symbols here that say these are straight lines. So if this top one's equal to 60, the bottom one must equal to 60, and so on with the vertical lines. It's always good just to check if your sketch is fully defined as you're progressing. It's a good habit to get into. So from there, we can exit our sketch. We can select these blue arrows. We can go into features. And now we want to add depth to our square. So we can see that this is one square, so it's 10 millimeters. So to add depth to our square, we want to use the feature called Extrude Boss Base. We click anywhere on the square. And we can see here, we can enter a depth. So we can enter whatever depth we want. We can enter 4,389 if we want. We can see we get a really, really big square. But for the moment, we're happy enough with 10 millimeters. Which has us back on track. So if we enter 10 millimeters and select OK, we can see we're hopefully on track and we've got the base of our square done. The next little feature that we might think is easy is we can say, okay, we know how to do a square and extrude it. So we know how to do a square. We could potentially do this square here. Next, and we'll use a different feature to cut out. So this square is 20 millimeters by 20 millimeters. Again, look at the boxes and count them. 1, 2, 2 by 10 is 20. 2 by 10 is 20, and we can see there's a gap of 10 from the edge of that last square. So if we go back to our SolidWorks drawing, again, if we select this top face, we right click and we select that normal to again, we should be brought to a screen that looks a bit like this.